Good evening. I'm here in my Lewisburg, West Virginia office and thought I would just test out the internet here at this office as opposed to the internet at my main office in Union, West Virginia. And really the difference is crazy. So I set up basically a mobile command studio here and I ran an internet test, and my download rate here in Lewisburg, this is using Suddenlink, is like 65 megabytes per second, or whatever the measurement is. 65 download. Upload, it was like, what was it? 10.6 megabytes per second upload. Download speed, 64.6 megabytes per second download speed. So this is using Suddenlink at my Lewisburg, West Virginia office. Now my main larger office down the road in Union, West Virginia is roughly 10 times slower than that. And I pay twice as much money for two different services. It's crazy. And that just brings up, hey, hillbilly, that just brings up the fact that kids cannot learn over the internet, not in West Virginia. It's going to be impossible because there are kids that don't even have, first of all, there are kids that can't even afford internet, but the kids even that can afford it, even, I buy every internet that I can possibly get in Monroe County, and it still sucks. Now, Lewisburg, here in downtown Lewisburg, the internet service is great compared to what I'm used to. So how can you have kids learning from home when they don't even have internet access? It's absolutely absurd. Now, I don't watch our governor's daily free campaign advertising, COVID updates, but apparently his live streams are getting so bad because he's overloading our internet and cellular infrastructure, putting himself on these ridiculous daily updates. You'd think that he just sent the West Virginia National Guard to invade North Korea or something. Like, we need daily updates on what the troop counts are and casualty numbers and what's going on the battlefront. Absolutely absurd that he needs to be on TV every day doing that. So maybe he's the one that's not only require our kids to do at least a portion of their schooling on the internet, but also crashing the internet for the rest of us, even the ones that can afford to have internet. So it looks like this connection is so much better than the one at my other office. Maybe I have to turn this into my live video studio. Let's see. Everything seems to work pretty well. They unfortunately will fix that with 5G. Elon Musk is launching satellites in space that will have 5G on them. So that's exactly probably what will happen, is just as soon as we spend $15 bazillion updating the infrastructure here in West Virginia with taxpayer money, the technology will change and we'll no longer need the hardwire connection. It'll all just be basically cellular and outer space. And that's how government operates, isn't it? What's really disconcerting is the fact that how far behind these kids really are going to be, robbing the kids of their future. It's funny with the election signs in West Virginia. Around here, you see our governor's signs, and some of them say they have his goofy face on the front, which I can't complain about that because I have a goofy face as well. But they say from 50th to 1st, and he's sitting there smiling. Well, do you want to elaborate on that? What did we go from 50th to 1st on? I think we're 50th in heart disease related deaths. We might be 51st this year. For those of, as Russia used to say, for those of you in Rio Linda. Is it possible for us to be 51st? Maybe we count Guam. What have we gone from 50th to 1st on? We're close to 50th on every metric. When he started, we were close to 50th on every metric 4 years later. I'm just curious as to what we've gone from 50th to first on. If you didn't catch it, speaking of bad internet, Marshall Wilson who's running against the governor, was doing a live stream, I believe from his home earlier today, and I caught some of it. But apparently it got cut off because the whole system is overloaded. Because again, Big Jim was doing his update, his daily update with his czar. I assume his czar was there. I didn't watch it. For his free campaign advertising. I mean, the COVID update. It's not healthy to have 5G everywhere. Well, I've just accepted the fact that I've got all sorts of invisible rays constantly passing. That's the reason I stopped keeping my cell phone. I don't have a pocket on this shirt, but I stopped keeping my cell phone right here because my father, who's a retired orthopedic surgeon, he said, get that thing away from your heart. Then I had a client who was a older gentleman from over around Fredericksburg, Virginia, and he was saying the same thing. Like, you got to keep that thing away from your head, keep it away from your vital organs. So I started keeping my phone only on, like, I buy pants that have the kind of knee length leg pocket, and that's where I keep my phone now for that reason. Marlene Moss, again, I'm not really talking about anything in particular on this video. Wasting a little time while the kid's strangling people. And I'm testing out the internet access at my second office here. I may just have to turn this from an office just to specifically a broadcast studio, because it has great, wonderful internet. Yes, write in Marshall Wilson for West Virginia governor. The word on the street is that he's gaining a lot of ground. He's gaining a lot of steam. It doesn't sound like anybody's happy with the West Virginia governor. I just met with some people yesterday that came in from across the country. And even over there, they've heard about the unpopularity of our governor and the fact that he locked down our state really for no good reason. The hero in all of this has been the governor of South Dakota. And I've never been to South Dakota, but hell, I'm ready to move to South Dakota because they have such a great governor and who protects your freedoms. But here in West Virginia, even though we've gotten great firearms laws from our legislature in the past few years, we've really become a really conservative red state that I would still refer to as a free state, especially as it pertains to firearm laws. But how did we end up with the governor that we have? And then Joe Manchin, who doesn't even want to vote for a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. He wants to wait and see if Biden gets to pick the person. I mean, how did we end up with such awful senator and governor in a state that has such a great traditional American conservative voting base? I mean, I know the answer to that. That's a rhetorical question. There were swamp creatures who put many years into setting all of that up. But anyways, the gubernatorial election, write in S.Marshall Wilson for West Virginia governor. That's my recommendation. You can catch one of his live streams where he answers any and all questions, and he's got a articulate, educated, constitutional answer to pretty much any question you throw at him. He was an officer in the Army. He's commanded troops in war. And he would be a fabulous governor for our state or any state. And we deserve better, do we not? We deserve better than the guy that we have mumbling over our internet infrastructure every weekday. Barry Goldwater, nice to see you again. I should have tried to do this. It usually goes up in 720 HD. This software technically, I believe, can do 1080 HD, but I know that my usual internet's not going to be able to do that. All right, Paul Phillips, corruption needs 3 months of public trials and conviction and sentenced. I'll tell you what, this whole thing that happened with the FBI, does anyone agree with me that the FBI do we even need an FBI anymore? I mean, you look at one of the top lawyers in the FBI, hopefully now is headed to federal prison for lying to a judge. And then you had really the director of the FBI and a number of the top people who were involved in basically a conspiracy to take down first a presidential candidate, but then a president of the United States. I mean, is that crazy or what? I mean, that's the executive branch. The president is supposed to preside, be their boss. And here we have the FBI turning on our own president. I can't wait till the rest of that comes out. I won't be surprised if nothing happens, but I'm optimistic that it does. I think there needs to be treason trials. I don't think it's enough to just have federal prosecutions of some of these people. They've not just violated the public trust. I think they've committed treason. Let's see, CDC is corrupt as well. Well, we don't need a CDC, do we? In fact, I see why we need the CIA, but I don't think we even need the FBI anymore. Back when the FBI was formed, that was when the very first gangsters were around. They had the Thompson submachine guns and the small little police forces. They had these little 38 caliber 5 or 6 shot revolvers. I mean, they really were no match, and the communications was not such that they could have 10,000 local police cruisers waiting when they crossed over the state line. It's a completely different era that we're in now. And if that's what the FBI is spending their time doing, that spying on our president for political reasons, or sending their SWAT team to arrest an elderly friend of the president like Roger Stone while tipping off CNN beforehand. I mean, we don't need a government agency to do that. Not in my opinion. And I've worked at the Department of Justice before on Pennsylvania Avenue in downtown Washington, D.C. They have a bazillion employees for pretty much anything and everything you could think of. And that's the funny thing, is you hear even some of the never Trumpers, like the Bush administration folks, coming out and criticizing Trump about what's going on in the country now with racist police everywhere and all of this. Well, the funny thing is that during the Bush administration, when I worked there at the Department of Justice, I was working on the little unit that investigated pattern of practice police misconduct across the United States, anywhere. And the funny thing is that one of these jurisdictions where there have been riots and they've been on TV, I spearheaded an investigation in one of these cities. And this was, again, during the Bush administration. I can recall drafting memos about the same sort of stuff that was going on back then. And this is 15 years ago. But the same sort of stuff was going on. The same sort of issues between the police and the Marxist kids on their bicycles. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And Bush only had like 2 or 3 people working on police misconduct, pattern of practice police misconduct for the entire country. 2 or 3 people. And so if he really thinks that we have a systematic nationwide system of racist cops or corrupt law enforcement all across the country, Well, why didn't somebody do something about it before? Because they only had 2 or 3 guys working on it back during the Bush administration. Now, I'm sure it ramped up during Obama's time there, but see, he was in control of this apparatus. He had the ability to send the FBI, to send federal prosecutors into any city, any jurisdiction in the country where he thought that there was a problem. And he probably only did it in a few places. And they did send federal prosecutors after a sheriff in West Virginia during the Bush administration who I believe was chasing a bank robber and kicked him or something like that. And they did send federal prosecutors to investigate, at least one or two of my cases here in West Virginia during that time period. I'm not even sure how I got on that line of thought. All right, Malcolm X. How hard is it for you to represent social justice in a historically racist part of the country? Well, we did have Senator Robert Byrd, who was in the KKK. Historically, that's true. Robert Byrd was racist. But as far as the people in West Virginia, I wouldn't agree with the premise that this part of the country is racist. I think this part of the country is majority, almost entirely white. I think it was mostly made up of it's kind of a mix, in my opinion, of Scotch Irish people that immigrated pretty early on from Ireland and from England, and who were involved in fighting the Revolutionary War and involved heavily in building our country from the beginning. Those were mostly poor folks, and whether I think you ought to judge anyone by the time period that they live in. And, the descendants of the Scotch Irish, and then we had a lot of Italians come into West Virginia, and Italians themselves suffered, great bigotry, ironically in New York. And so they came to West Virginia, and they created a melting pot of sorts here. So I don't think that West Virginia is a racist part of the country as you would refer to it. A lot of the real racist plantation culture that was down in South Carolina. I mean, Virginia wasn't even that big into that. That was primarily down, South Carolina, Mississippi area, all down in there. So, I wouldn't judge West Virginians in that way. That being said, West Virginia is the reason I know that the police misconduct problems that exist are not a racist conspiracy, because I've been doing that for 15 years in West Virginia, and it's been almost all involving white people, white cops, and white clients. Now, not always. I'd have represented some, especially down the McDowell County area. I represented this guy named Antonio Tolliver, who was pulled over for basically driving while black by a West Virginia state trooper who's no longer a West Virginia state trooper. And he was pulled over for something stupid. Then he was asked, well, where's the drugs? And there was no information that there was drugs. He was just judging him. And he was a good guy. He had his own trucking business and didn't in any way appear to be a drug dealer or even a drug user, and basically beat him up after that. I had some other, I had an elderly black gentleman there named Mr. Ferguson who had his own encounter with the same guy. But this same trooper also beat up this white kid named Aaron. And he was a good kid, broke the kid's back. And so we had 4 or 5 lawsuits down there. And there are still some issues in places. And I have one case coming up that is going to center on that. But for the most part, I've found the people of West Virginia to be very fair and not a judgmental people at all. And in fact, it's different because they're really, you don't see segregated towns in West Virginia in the rural areas. Where I grew up in Florida, every town has got like the railroad tracks. Then you have the like the black side of town, or the black neighborhood, or Booker T. Washington High School on the other side of the tracks. And that was all set up starting back in the Jim Crow era, but it's still that way a lot of the time. And the high school that I went to, and I went to a Catholic high school, but it was right on the edge of, it was almost in Palm Bay, Florida. And it was right on the edge of, the black neighborhoods right there around Palm Bay. And, it was, there was a lot of crime right there in that area. But the funny thing is they used to recruit our best football players right out of that neighborhood. This one guy called Gerard Jackson. He's a good friend of mine in high school. I think he beat Emmitt Smith's rushing record. He was state player of the year. I don't know if it was my junior year or senior year. And he had been basically given a scholarship right out of that neighborhood. Another guy named Marvin, and another guy named Linwood. So I got to know some of those guys pretty well. So I spent a lot of time right there. But the fact is there is a lot of social interaction between different classes of people, different colors of people. And there's still a lot of segregation down there, but there's a lot of interaction one way or the other. In West Virginia, on the other hand, it's more isolated, where you have entire communities of, like I said, people just with completely Scotch-Irish blood in them who've never lived in a community like that. So they don't even necessarily, have the interactions to base a prejudice off of. So I don't think it's a problem in West Virginia at all in current times. Now, in the past, again, we had a senator who was in the KKK, but that's old news now. Am I calling out Booker T? Booker T sucker. I am an old school wrestling fan, but I don't remember that one. One of my next door neighbors here in West Virginia was a WWF wrestler, old school. Okay, Truck Brothers, yet the BLM are being paid to divide everybody all morning, but agent provocateurs. Yeah, I think that BLM has to be viewed as a political organization because it is full of Marxists. Now, it doesn't mean that all of their causes are Marxist, or that everyone that supports them or is in that organization, though I don't think that there's a membership card, is a Marxist. But I think it's crossed the line into a Marxist political organization, and they're doing a lot of political advocacy, and they've never shown any interest in any of my cases, even the black clients. Many domestic terroristic groups are politically inspired. Yeah, I mean, so are you calling Black Lives Matter a domestic terrorist group? So I mean, politically inspired. So BLM is the Klan with the team. All right. Well, whatever it is, it hasn't really had any effect that I've seen in West Virginia. And in fact, it's probably going to have the opposite effect. I think that BLM has really, I think it's opened the eyes to a large group of people who are not going to say anything about it. They're quiet about it, but I think it's aggravating a lot of people. And I think it's making problems worse where there are problems, and it's creating new problems where possibly there weren't problems before. Let's see, can we charge Soros under the RICO Act? I really don't have any idea about that. I saw on Fox News the other day where somebody tried to bring up Soros, and they shut him down quickly. So Soros has a lot of power, but RICO Act, far as I know, I mean that's like the federal criminal prosecutors get to prosecute gangsters under the RICO Act. So if they really wanted to, I'm sure they could, but that's not really my lane. Let's see, treat others the way you want to be treated. Simple. Don't need social justice. That's really the thought police. Yeah, I agree with that. All right. All right. I'll try to answer your question here. As a white man yourself, what racism have you experienced personally, and do you think it contributes to the overall problem regarding race in general? Well, I'm not a spokesman for racial issues. And as far as your question, what racism have I experienced personally? I mean, I don't know that I'm alleging to anybody that I've experienced racism. I hadn't even thought about it. I mean, I guess we all are affected by it in some way, because when you divide people by the color of their skin, I mean, all you're going to get is racial separatism. And so that's going to affect everybody. So maybe when I applied to certain law schools, maybe I didn't get in because I was a white male. It's not just about skin color, but it's about who knows how many genders at this point. But so they, even at law schools, at most admissions places, they will accept a certain percentage of minority students and certain percentage of women. So they got to have 51% or whatever women in the new law school class. Then they have to have like 33% or whatever the case may be of various minority classified students. And then that puts me at a disadvantage because I am a male, so I'm in the 49%, and that knocks me down. And then I'm white, so then that knocks me down. And so if out of 1,000 people applying, statistics would usually show that there are more white people applying for it because they're a majority of the population. And maybe there's more males than females applying. And if that's the case, then because of my skin color and my gender, I've been put into a smaller potential pool, and that's now become more competitive. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but I think, affirmative action and those sorts of things, if you're going to call that racism, and I don't think that's racism. I mean, I think racism is an overused term, but, I think that there's been discrimination based on skin color that I've suffered. There's no doubt, job applications, school applications. Well, here's another one is football. I mean, football, right? So I went to my undergrad. I went to University of Central Florida. I went there to play football. I got invited to be on the football team. 10 days after I graduated, I arrived at UCF to begin football boot camp, basically. Hell on earth. And eventually I was really one of, I was a defensive end in college. And there was like one other white guy out of my group, which was the defensive line and the linebackers. So there was only 2 of us who were white, and the rest were black guys. And so do they discriminate on the basis of color in football? Now, yeah, they do, but it's not necessarily because they want to. It's because that's who's best. They're faster, stronger, generally, just based on physical differences. And so, most of your football defenses in Division I college football or in the NFL, you're going to have a large majority of black players on those defensive positions. Whereas, black Americans in general, you're looking at like 13% of the population. But football, especially like Division I football, you're looking at an overwhelming percentage, especially on the defense. Now, because on the offense, you've got the big white guys playing the offensive line. And that's generally how you have it, is you got the big country boys, white, corn-fed white guys, 350 pounds, 6'7", playing on the offensive line. And then, and they're big and slow. And so on the defense, not only do you have to be big, but you have to be able to run 4.8 40 or 4.7 40. And it turns out it's all, it's by merit, but it's all black guys that end up on there. So I'm only one of, 2 on the defensive, 2 white guys on the defensive line. Now, again, I don't call that racism. Is that discrimination? Well, yes and no. I don't think that anyone was picked because of their skin color, but that's how it turned out. It's also that way with the prison system. And again, Malcolm X, look at Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was a prosecutor and the Attorney General of California. Look at how many black guys she put in prison. I don't know what the number is, but I guarantee it's way up there. And there certainly has been discrimination, if not even for that purpose, in the outcome, and how many young black males have been incarcerated by these prosecutors like Kamala Harris. How big am I? Well, you can't tell. I'm 6'4", probably 245 pounds now. I was 6'5" in college. I'm not sure how I dropped an inch, but I was probably 6'5", 265 once I grew out all the way when I was in college. And I ran about a 4.8 40 to my recollection. So that was about perfect size for defensive end, which is why I played defensive end. What I really wanted to do was play for the Gators. That was my dream growing up, is I wanted to play for the Gators. My father was a quarterback for the Gators, and I wasn't a quarterback, but I did want to play for the Gators, and I was recruited by them, and I went through their training camps, and I spent a lot of time there. I worked with their coaches. I competed head to head with other people for the spots on the incoming team, and I didn't get it. Let's see. Kamala Harris is arguably the most hypocritical presidential candidate since Obama and Hillary. Yeah, it's Kamala Harris is, and I think I've done a video on this, but you want to talk about systematic inequality. You look at the prosecutors, not all prosecutors, of course, because I know some of them well that are really good people, but you look at the prosecutors in Kenosha, Wisconsin, look at the prosecutors in all over California. These people have filled prisons. They've filled prisons, and the criminal justice system itself is completely unequal. It's completely unfair, and it does have a disparate impact on certain groups of people. That's just the way it is. And you can look at a lot of these laws and who designed them, but Democrats. Who designed them? Joe Biden himself was involved in a lot of this. You go back and look at some of the legislation that he put through in the 90s. Him and Bill Clinton, a lot of the stuff that they did, it was the 90s version of Jim Crow laws. And look at gun control. Even the gun control laws in North Carolina that are still there, these were Jim Crow laws that would allow the sheriff's the elected sheriffs, to decide who gets to have a pistol, who gets to have a concealed weapon permit. And why is that? Because they could keep weapons out of the hands of blacks. That's what a lot of this gun control was. And if you read the Heller decision, 2008 Supreme Court, they discuss a little bit of that. There's also a really good law review article coming out of my law school, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, on the issue of gun control in the context of civil rights. You're in the thick of it. You're in Southern California. Southern California, and here's another thing, that's a one-party state. That entire state is run by the Democrats. All right, so how many race problems, race issues, police issues have there been in California? I mean, hell, that's where Rodney King happened. And all of this stuff has come out of California. And who's been running California? It's been Democrats running all of these big city police departments. And somehow they blame Donald Trump for the racial issues that exist now. I mean, they've been nurturing, if not creating, these issues for decades. That's a good point. Let's see. I'll put that one up too. I've been assaulted for wearing a red shirt, no Trump logo or affiliation on it. Isn't that exactly the truth? Is let's look at the racism that we've seen. And I've called this, and I didn't create this, but I've talked about this before. It's the racism of low, what is it? The soft bigotry of low expectations. Isn't that exactly what we see out of the left, out of the Democrats, out of Joe Biden? And what was it that he said? Something about rich people and rich kids get something, but black kids, we should help black kids too. So again, it's the soft bigotry of lowered expectations. That's exactly what we get out of them. The way some politicians act, it's still about keeping blacks disarmed with poor whites. Well, it's, the race pimps in the Democrat Party, the Jesse Jacksons, the Al Sharptons, and there's any number of them. But what would they do if there were no racial issues? How would they make money? They wouldn't. They make money by stoking these things. And that is my problem with the Black Lives Matter movement, is really, it's a racial separatism. It's promoting separatism of the races. It's just like at my college, at my law school, they have the black student unions. I remember I was a student senator at University of Central Florida. I can remember debating some of my teammates on the trial team that were in the black student union and also student senators. And we would debate this thing. And I think it was always a good point of well, there's no white student union, because that would be racist, of course. But so how is it okay to have a black student union? What it is it's promoting racial separatism. And I don't know that I can be convinced otherwise. I understand why they're doing it. I understand what they do. But if you were to equalize that, then you have a racist group on the other side. So, I mean, you're separating the races, you're promoting the separation of races, and you're aggravating the issues that exist. I'd hope your main problem with BLM is wrong one. It's the fact that they're Marxists. I already said that, and I've said that in a lot of videos. watch my video that I did. If you can go back on that's right. This is going Facebook and YouTube. But if you go on my YouTube channel, look at the video I did on fascism, because that's exactly what BLM and Antifa, that's what they're doing, is the same thing that the fascists did. And fascism was created by Benito Mussolini. And he was a journalist, a socialist journalist. He was a member of the Socialist Party, and he split from the Socialist Party and he created the Fascist Party, or something. I'm not sure what it was called in Italian, but he created fascism. He was the founder of it. And all he was is a socialist that became pro-war. So that was the difference between the Socialist Party and the Fascist Party that was created in Italy, is they were just socialists who were pro-war. And then the Socialist Party themselves were anti-war. And this is around World War I that this started. But as far as domestic policies go, where the government owns you and owns your business, and you have no individual rights, you have no religious rights, domestic policies, they agreed on all of that. Yeah, Benito Mussolini. Yeah, did I say something else? But yeah, Benito Mussolini in Italy was the creator of fascism, and it was pretty much the same thing as communism. Domestic policy-wise, their policies were all what we would call communist or socialist. And Black Lives Matter, for them to be advocating for communism or socialism, I don't see who that's helping. It feels to me like they're using a legitimate problem that's out there, and they're using legitimate feelings. They're using legitimate racial issues, and that's being used by the communists. And you'll notice they're mostly white, and the socialists that have always been out there. When I was working for the Department of Justice in 2004 or 2005, these same little communists were out there throwing Molotov cocktails at the cops. They were handing out decks of playing cards with the cop's picture on it, with their home address, the name of their kids and their family. I mean, all of this was going on. And now they've seen a vehicle that they can use to push their agenda, and that's the Black Lives Matter movement, because there's all this racial animosity, all these issues that have been building up over the years, which I would argue have been stoked, and if not created, by Democrats like Joe Biden. They're now being hijacked by this group of Marxists that they don't care about, the Black Lives Matter itself. I mean, it's not about fixing racial problems that exist. It's not even about fixing issues of police misconduct. It's just about pushing a radical leftist communist agenda. And I think we beat that by education, because people need to understand, they justify what they're doing by saying that they're fighting fascists. Well, we're fighting fascists. Well, no, you're not fighting fascists. How are Trump supporters, or just conservative Republicans in general, how are they fascists? Because fascists, they don't believe in individual liberty. They don't believe in religion. The only thing in common with fascists and Trump supporters, for instance, is nationalism. They love their country. But that is one small component of fascism, is nationalism. And that's the difference between communism and fascism. Fascism is promoting one particular country. Communism seeks to infect the entire world. But the only thing that Trump supporters or conservative Republicans have in common with the fascists is a nationalistic spirit. But they can't be fascist, because generally Trump supporters, conservative Republicans, have been, the religious ones. They value religious liberty. They comprise of the the religious groups, the evangelicals, and now more of the Catholics are joining that side. And fascists, by definition, they do not allow religion. They are strict atheists. Fascists do not value individual rights, such as the right to bear arms. Fascists do not allow the right to bear arms. They don't allow concealed carry permits. They don't allow open carry. They don't promote and protect a Bill of Rights. So there's nothing in common with Trump supporters, with the conservative right, with the religious right, and fascists. So let's see. You find it hypocritical that a lot of leftists praise foreign countries that have extremely strong nationalist ideologies, such as Mexico and Brazil. That's a great point. That's a great point because, like I said, the only thing in common that Trump supporters have with fascism is the fact that they're nationalistic, and there should be nothing wrong with that. So yeah, they're saying that if you're proud, and that's where they're going with this, being proud, and that makes a lot of sense because it all comes together. Kneeling at the flag, burning the flag. So if you protect the flag, if you value the flag, if you respect the flag, then therefore you must be a fascist, because that means you're nationalistic. And of course, that's what fascists are, right? They're just nationalistic racists. And they use the racist term anyway. So, you're never going to prove that you're not a racist. Right. So Mexico. So Mexico. So yeah, the people that even the Americans that fly the Mexican flag. So, that does not make them fascists because they have national pride of Mexico. And the funny thing is a lot of these other countries, they have a similar history that we have in America. When we're talking about slavery, well, America we didn't even have the majority of slaves in the Western Hemisphere. There were more slaves in outside present-day United States, in the Caribbean. It's like Jamaica. You think that someone who looked like Bob Marley was the original occupant of the island of Jamaica? No. They brought slaves to Jamaica. And who did that? The European powers. Who was the largest importer of slaves to North America after 1650? That was England. England brought the majority of slaves to North America after about 1650. In fact, they didn't outlaw slavery until the 1840s. And yet, how did they escape having a historical tradition of racism and slavery? Well, they were the slave traders. They brought the slaves and sold them in North America, and they profited off of it. But the slaves weren't there. They were in America, or they were in the Caribbean, or they were in Central America or South America. And so every one of those countries has the same exact history. And the real bad guy in all of these stories, it all goes back to these European countries, and especially England, who was they were the lords and the rich guys who made money off of literally transporting slaves in chains across the ocean in slave ships. And yet somehow they get to escape all of this. And the reason is because it's not really about the history. It's really about the communists doing what communists do, and that's propagandizing. And they don't really dislike our history, or they hate us as a country. They want to transform. They want to significantly transform this country into a socialist or a communist country, in my opinion anyways. As an MMA fan, Brazilians are extremely gung-ho about their fighters. When American fighters fight in Brazil, the crowds chant, "Portuguese, you're going to die." Yeah, and I see nothing wrong with that. A good friend of mine is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from Brazil, who was a UFC fighter, and he trains a lot of current UFC fighters. And it's funny. He's been here for a long time, and he still has a very thick Brazilian accent. But that's true. They love jiu-jitsu. They love MMA in Brazil. And is it wrong for them to want the Brazilian fighter to win? And no, I think that it's a good thing for people to be proud of their country and to root for their country and to compete with other countries. And talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was all about respecting the American flag. And a lot of people don't know that she called Colin Kaepernick dumb for what he was doing and didn't like the fact that he disrespected the American flag or disrespected the national anthem. And so those are two icons of the American left. And which icon is more important? Well, who knows? Sadly, Ruth Bader Ginsburg better be more important. And she did respect the American flag, and she did respect our country. And Colin Kaepernick has done, what has he done other than divide this country? All right, so I've gone on for 52 minutes and 13 seconds just to check the internet connection here at my Lewisburg office. And so I appreciate you having a conversation with me and had some good dialogue here. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, it's called The Civil Rights Lawyer. Do it, and you can find it from my website, thecivilrightslawyer.com. But make sure you subscribe to YouTube. I really like doing stuff over there, and it doesn't get censored as much as things do on Facebook. So make sure to subscribe. And I'm probably I want to be able to pick a certain night or day to do my Freedom is Scary program, because then people know when it's going to happen, and that's going to get better viewership in theory. So it looks like Mondays always work the best for me, but I'm just so busy that it's hard to pick a time, because sometimes I'm traveling or preparing for court or whatnot, or filing or suing the governor. But I'm going to try to go for Monday nights to do Freedom is Scary, and that way I can prepare some on the weekend and it doesn't get in the way of work. So thanks for watching. And now, again, speaking of jiu-jitsu, my kid's out, strangling other kids at the moment, and I probably have to go pick them up here. But thanks for watching. And again, enjoy the discussion. And until next time.